if we want our employees to kind of share our content on social and share it authentically, we have to make sure that the conditions are right for that. And for those conditions to be right, actually, we have to make sure that our own content model is right from a broader organizational level. Because if we're not sharing good enough content, we've not got content to give to our people to share that's good enough. It's not going to achieve the impacts that we want to achieve.
That was Kunal, and this is Social 3.0, the podcast dedicated to helping you drive growth through content and communities. In this episode, I sit down with Kunal Gandhi, Global Head of Social at PwC. We talk through how he's scaling social media impact through employees, how he's created an operating model to underpin that. We also talk about his excitement around the future of generative AI to unlock even more value in these kinds of initiatives, and the importance of leadership buy-in. What Kunal's created at PwC around social is nothing short of inspiring, and it's a great journey that we can all take some inspiration from. I really hope you enjoy this episode. Kunal, thank you so much for taking a bit of time, and it feels like I've seen you quite a lot of late, which is quite a privilege, really. So over the course of this show, we really want to dive into like scaling business impact through employees, of which I know it's like that your heartland is something that you've cared deeply about and continue to care deeply about. But before we get into all of the goodness that we'll talk about today, love for you to give listeners a bit of perspective on like what's got you to this point. Give a bit of an understanding of your current role and your journey to get there, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So currently I am the global social media leader for PwC. Within my role, we oversee everything from the global social media strategy to everything that could encompass that. So employee advocacy is a really important part of that. Arming our leadership with good social media communications, making sure our global channels are sharing the right insights and levels of what we do. So there's a lot of different areas that we look at. As a global role, we also help a lot of our territories with the kind of advice and guidance that they need, making sure that they're set up for success as well. We're a big organization, 151 territories we work in. 360,000 employees across that broad base as well.
Is that
it? So it's pretty big. And more broadly speaking, I've been working in social for about 15 years now. So quite a long time in some senses. Started kind of just when Twitter and different things were kind of really kicking off. Fell into it really by accident. Social media jobs didn't even exist when I graduated. But I got into digital marketing, got into social media, and went to a few courses where I actually said to one of the people leading the course, I didn't learn anything in what you said. And he said to me, there's a big market out there for this sort of stuff, you should look into it. And so I ended up freelancing for a few years. And then from that, I ended up getting a full-time role at an education company and doing things there. Then I went on to do it at a leading bank in the UK. And now I'm at PwC doing it. So doing it at a global level definitely has its quirks. It's definitely fun, and no day is the same. So yeah, really enjoy it. And social is always changing. So there's a lot I've seen over the time. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. So, and you've been at your current role for like 3 years?
Yeah, coming up to 3 years now at PwC.
Nice. Okay. So how have you seen your scope evolve? How have you seen social evolve, and how you're using social specifically in PwC evolve?
So from when I joined at PwC, I think the one thing that was there by the time that I had joined was there was a clear recognition of the importance of social.
Nice.
That was already there. So that was really, really helpful. I think the challenge that we had and that most B2Bs have is in making sure, how do we effectively activate this? How do we activate it at scale? And how do we do that at a company level and at a people level? And that was a really important part of making sure when I came into the role, how we do that in a way that can be sustainable and actually achievable. So it's not just about running and doing 10 or 20 different things. It's about focusing on understanding where are we doing things well at the moment, where are we not doing things well at the moment, fixing the things that we should be doing well, and using that foundation to start to do things elsewhere. So I think the fact that we had that buy-in already around knowing that social is important, but just making sure that we focus in the right areas to begin with was really, really important in making sure that we do that. I've been in many organizations where actually you need to create that buy-in as well. That's a really, really important part sometimes that you need to do. So even though we have that buy-in at a certain level, there may be certain areas of social where people may not believe in it or may not see it as important. And as social is evolving, there may be an area when you first started out that didn't even exist, that does now exist. So there's probably always conversations happening that follow, how to get the buy-in, how to do that sort of stuff. And having done that for a number of years, I think it's a really important thing where actually a lot of the principles that you apply in social to the audience that you want to talk to, you can probably apply them to when you're trying to get buy-in with your leadership. It's about making sure you tailor your language in a way that will be understandable to them, making sure that you understand what's in it for them if they do it. So it's about making sure they understand the impact around doing that. And I think if you're really good at being able to kind of craft messaging and copy and creative and content for your social media channel, you can probably find a good way to make a business case as long as it works for your organization. So there are skills in there that actually help you across the board.
That's a really good way of thinking about it. And as you say, such an important way or important thing that you had in place to have like the foundations of support and buy-in for what you do. So you've got some buy-in, you know that you've got an incredibly big role. There's some things that are happening well, potentially, some things that could be optimized, as you were saying. So were there already employees like going out on their own, posting their personal profile about PwC, that in place? So interested to know how you took some of that early signs of success, how you modeled that, how you kind of then created a bit of an operating model around it.
Yeah, so we did have a handful of global leaders and a handful of other colleagues who were going out there doing a number of activity themselves that was largely off their own back. And it was about making sure actually finding the people who were our core strong advocates who had that appetite already, and really kind of putting our arms around and making sure that they've got everything that they need, setting them up for success and making them our role models for the more wider program that we wanted to roll out. So in terms of doing that, what we actually did was we completely pared back and looked at our original operating model from the first place. Because if we want our employees to kind of share our content on social and share it authentically, we have to make sure that the conditions are right for that. And for those conditions to be right, actually, we have to make sure that our own content model is right from a broader organizational level. Because if we're not sharing good enough content, we've not got content to give to our people to share that's good enough. It's not going to achieve the impacts that we want to achieve.
Got you, yeah.
So when it came to that, what we did was we put in a new operating model and a content model where there were three key spokes that we focused on, and that's content, creative, and data. And so the way that they work is content basically focuses on the underlying content that you are planning to share on social media and to plan to link to elsewhere. Creative is how are you bringing that content to life on social media? Bearing in mind, 90% of your audience, if not more now, are viewing it on mobile. They want to be served the information in the feed. They don't want to go anywhere else. Are we making sure that we're giving them enough insight into that? And are we doing it in a creative, thumb-stopping way? Because there is so much noise and so much attention on that. We want to make sure that actually we can get people's attention. So making sure that that creative model was there. So we had people kind of bringing the content to life in a way that was the most optimized with the platforms and kind of the different formats in mind. And then data underpins all of that. Constantly looking at how things are doing, how things are performing, and using that data-driven insight to kind of inform what we do in the future, what we do more of, what we do less of, and making sure that we kind of continue to evolve and make sure that we see how that works. So, it kind of works like a nice circle where, your content, creative, data works together. And if you've got those three working quite well, then your data will inform your future content that gets created. That content informs how you're going to use your creative, and those things together, the data will tell you where it is, and you can kind of keep working on that. So we made that model work. And as that content got better and better, we had better and better content to share with our employees to say, hey, you could amplify these different pieces. Here's how you could do it. And then the authenticity piece is really, really important as part of this. You've got to make sure that when people are sharing content, they're sharing it in a way that is truly authentic to them. It can't just be them sharing the lines that you want them to share because it's something that you want them to say. If that's not what's going to resonate with that person's audience, then it's not going to have the impact you want it to have. And you've got to remember that final impact in mind. So you have to give your employees a little bit of freedom and some trust to make sure that they are sharing it in a way that's right for them, and the guidance to make sure that you tell them, hey, listen, here is some suggested things that you could say, but adapt this and change this and make sure that it's in your own tone of voice so that it's a lot more resonating with your audience. And actually, if there's something that we're sharing with you that you don't feel would be relevant for you to share, don't share it. That's okay. You don't need to bombard your followers with every single thing that we're doing. And you want to get the balance right of sharing our content with sharing your personal content. So making sure you have that kind of personal mix in there. It's not just about making sure that we're doing that because we want content out there. It's about doing it in a way where our people feel as though they are sharing it because they truly want to share it, not just because we want them to share it.
Got you. That makes a ton of sense. And I really like the three spokes as you describe it. So double clicking on that a little bit. the content that you refer to, I'm guessing that content probably comes from elsewhere in the business too, because they might be your white papers, research, that kind of stuff. So does the data that you talk about like inform other teams' strategies around the content that they'll create too?
Yeah, it definitely can. So the content, the underlying content that we get definitely comes from different marketing teams, communication teams, and like wider reports of projects that we do year round. So we have things like our global CEO survey that looks into kind of the insights of CEOs for the year ahead. We have our hopes and fears survey, which looks at kind of the perspectives that people have on the workforce over the coming year. From that sort of stuff, we can do a lot of things, but then we'll have, different advisory lines and audit lines and service lines where we provide consulting on so many different areas, and we have thought leadership from different people around that sort of stuff. So that's where the content comes from. What we can do is, especially with some of our major reports, if we know that actually on a report that we did on report X, the AI findings in particular, for example, did really well when we shared them compared to other areas, we can inform that straight back to the people who wrote the report and kind of, set all that up so that they're aware that actually from an audience perspective, something is resonating a lot more than something else. All the insights are important, but then we can make sure that we look at actually if there is something within that we could tap into, are there more questions for a survey in the future that we could ask based on that we know are going to kind of have a bigger cut through with what we're trying to do. So it definitely is somewhere where the impact of social can and does inform what we do within our kind of report. So again, that's where social, it's not just the content is not just being, social is not driving just the content that's there. We are actually also feeding that back in, and then that's driving it so that the next time you see a survey, there may be an adaptation or something within that has come from the fact that we shared something in social in a certain way. We didn't expect X to work, but it actually does. So there could be more we can tap into. So there is a really good open line there back.
That's really interesting, actually. And it feels to me like you and your team are acting as like the curators of this. You get your big report, you're looking at those interesting things, thinking with your social first lens, going, what are the snippets we can extract from that'll work well on social? So am I right in thinking that's kind of like your curatorial mind?
Definitely. Like the one thing that we are really lucky with is we do not have a lack of content.
Yeah.
We have so much stuff coming our way, and in a way it allows us to be selective, but it also keeps us honest. We've got a really good kind of guideline process and a criteria where actually if our content is not serving our purpose, which is to kind of, build trust in society and deliver sustained outcomes, if the things that we're creating don't demonstrate that in some way, if it's not, especially at a global level, globally relevant, there are all these things that we can look at and go, actually, if this doesn't quite work. So when we do have all of that content, this is where the data point comes in. We do monthly deep dives, and those monthly deep dives are quite literally exports, Excel exports, where we're looking at
directly from the platforms,
looking at what performed best in terms of click-through rates, so that we know from what's going to the website, what performed best in terms of likes, shares, reposts, all the different metrics, just so that we can understand user behavior a bit more and say, actually, well, this worked, this carousel post that we did got a lot of engagement. This video that we did got a lot of click-throughs or views or whatever else. And from that, we go, actually, based on what we know about this, what more could we do with it? How can we inform that back to the business? What could they do in another area on this? So we are always kind of curious about that sort of stuff from the perspective of making sure that our content is being shared in the most effective way, but also it helps us to stay up to date with how the platforms are changing. The platforms are always changing. They're always doing something different. Something that you did 3 months ago and that worked really well for you for a long time, suddenly there's a real big dip in the engagement there now. So you can't just kind of sit on your laurels and do something for a while and go, right, well, that's always worked, let's just do it. It may change at any point, and you want to make sure you stay ahead of that as best as you can.
Yeah.
We're in an environment at the moment where LinkedIn is previewing and trying vertical video. So we have to look at that and go, actually, we have no baseline data for that. How is it actually doing? How's it working? How's that going to work from a B2B perspective? And so we have to then kind of explore, test and learn, just as we have when other formats have been released, see how that works and then try things with that. So we definitely kind of have that curious mind from the perspective of making sure that we're getting the most out of our content, but making sure that we're really kind of maximizing and leveraging all the options that are available to us through a social network and the creative formats available.
Nice. So in those monthly deep dives, you're exporting all of the data from the platforms directly. Are you just doing manual analysis on it, or are you running it through any kind of AI model at all?
We're not running it through any AI model at the moment. At the moment, it is just a team of us who enjoy a little bit of time, but like we'll spend some time separately, just kind of having a quick digest through it before we do a call, and then everybody will bring a few observations or insights.
Gotcha.
It's a completely agenda-free meeting. It's actually just, whatever you think you've picked out that could be interesting, could not, this is interesting, this is not interesting. I'm not sure why this happened. And then from there, just letting the conversation run. And that's where we've ended up creating some of our best ideas, because it's just been something going off on a tangent somewhere else. We end up seeing something else. We end up talking about something else. And before you know it, we've got a really good idea that we've been able to form through that. So yeah, we're doing it ourselves at the moment. I think AI has a massive potential to help us with it. But we're still at the stage where we're exploring kind of how we effectively use that in the best way.
Gotcha. But I I absolutely love creating the space to allow like free flow ideation. You've got some data and inspiration, but you're creating that space for the team to come together to collectively think on what those next ideas could be. And it just continually keeps you fresh, because it's all too easy just to like forget those monthly strategy meetings and it just for the content just to continue. But creating the space to go, guys, are we doing this right? Are we making the best decisions? Are we, do we need to course correct? And I love that. Yeah. I think one other thing I wanted to double click into related to your kind of spokes was to the point about that you said about having elements from your big content, your big kind of research papers, but making that in the feed, right? Super important. No one's clicking links in the feed, etc. Do you find any pushback with that, where you're trying to take these insights, which are incredibly high value, and then give it away for free on social? Has that been a challenge to try and get that okayed in that way, or is it just accepted now?
So we're quite lucky in that we have a license on our social channels to kind of share things in the way that we think is most effective. So nice. We haven't necessarily had pushback in that respect. And I think that's where we are super, super lucky. However, even with that being said, we are kind of mindful of the conflicting priorities that we do have. We want to share that insight with people. We want to make sure that they get that information. We also want people to go to the website so they can find out more.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Actually, are they going to do that if we give them everything? And so from that perspective, we try and find a balance where we have to accept that actually, if we go down one route, which is we just provide a little bit of a preview of what's going on, we may lose absolutely everyone and people may not go there. If we do provide a little bit of insight and feedback, it still had that kind of awareness impact, which I think is really, really important. We have to understand what the purpose of what we're doing is. And the purpose of what we're doing is to raise that awareness so that, ultimately everything kind of falls under a business impact or some level of ROI. We're like, why are we doing this? Ultimately, the thought leadership and the insights that we have kind of help to showcase the expertise that we have within our business. That expertise can help organizations kind of with similar issues or problems if they have them. So, given how kind of social works now, what works for us really well is that if we can share that insight onto our platforms, there may be something that months down the line, somebody will remember that actually PwC shared something on this. So I think they know what they're talking about. So we should do that. And so from our perspective, the value is always there to make sure that we do that. We haven't had the pushback on it, but I think there is an appreciation for the wider value of doing it in the way that we do it. And that is really, really important for us. If you think about just more broadly, how people, make their purchasing decisions now. We were at an event last week where they basically said, 86% of people know, the 3 to 4 brands that they want to work with at a B2B level. And then 92% of people end up picking a brand from that list. How do you get on that list if you're not on that list in the first place? You have to create awareness. That awareness comes from the sort of content that we're sharing to get into people's feeds, to make sure that people know who we are and what we do. We're seen as an accountancy firm more broadly. We offer kind of consulting and services in so many different areas that people may not even know about. And unless we share our content and our thought leadership and our insight in those spaces, people aren't going to know that. And so it's really important for us to make sure that we do that in these key spaces. And that allows that to be the case. People, if you want to kind of choose who you want to work with going forward, you just search now. You just search online for what you want to do. And there are people looking you up and checking out what you're doing without you even realizing it. You've got to make sure you create the conditions online where when they do find you, they find really good stuff that you're doing. That especially applies on social, where social channels in some cases are becoming bigger and stronger search engines than the actual search engines are. So it's about making sure that actually we're creating the content on those platforms that people see and it lands in the right way. So for us, we haven't had that kind of pushback, but there is always that conflicting thing around, we know that we want people to get through to the web. So we'll try and find a mix where sometimes we will share bits where we won't share all the insight at once, but then we'll do other posts where we will share the insights. And then we'll come back to those deep dives where they'll all be lumped together in one category for a project. We'll go, right, how did that one do? How did that one do? How does that work within our kind of overall aim?
Nice. So that's really just about striking the right balance between value in the feed plus not giving away too much to still create the need for people to click through those reports. So given that you've got such an incredible plethora of content to work through, naturally far too much content that could ever go in your global channels or even the regional channels. So I'm guessing working through employees and using the employee advocacy and building that influence through your employees and your 350,000, I think, I can't remember the number exactly, but 300,000 plus creates a great way for that content to find natural homes and spaces, right? So yeah, I'm curious to know how you then disseminate that type of content. How do you get the right content in the right hands of the individuals that are best placed to share it?
Yeah, so we have a lot of different content in a lot of different ways. We do use employee advocacy platforms like most B2Bs do at the moment to kind of really share our content. It essentially works as a bit of an internal social network within which all the content is curated. You see all the different things that we have. It's split by different categories and lines of service. Each piece of content has with it suggested guidance as to how to share it, what to do with it. And employees can basically share that out however they want to. So that's how it works at a very, very, very high level. The importance around having that is because actually our employees can be such a bigger voice than our brand pages are. At a social perspective, if you think about it, the social networks will serve you a lot more content from people than they will from brands, especially at an organic level. So the reach that we will get from our people sharing stuff will actually always outstrip what reach we get at a global level from our brand channel. And so that's why our employees are a really, really important part of that model. If you think about the fact that on LinkedIn at the moment, we have just over 6 million followers, it's a really good number. It's a really high number. But if we look at, we've got 360,000 employees. Let's just say the average connection amount they have is 500 connections. That's still a potential reach of 180 million just there. So everybody's not going to use it. Everybody's going to be on different ends of the scale. But the number of the potential reach that we have is still more than the amount of followers that we have. And it's why the employees are such an important part of making sure that they activate our content, they do it in the right way. And it's about making sure that when they do that, as we've kind of spoken about, the authenticity piece is so important. It's about making sure that they share it in the right way, they share it in a way that's natural to their audience, and that they only share things that are actually relevant. So that's where we do have really, really niche lines of work that we do where people can share content on that specific stuff and do it in that way. And that outlet of getting people to do it themselves is a lot more better because they'll have the network that we want to reach. They'll have that specific group of people that we want to reach. And there's also like there's a two-way thing here. It's not just about what's in it for the company, it's about what's in it for the employee. There are so many benefits to them doing it. It enhances their own personal brand. It builds their own credibility by doing it. It builds trust with that person. People buy from people at the end of the day. And so it's making sure that it's done in that way. There are benefits here for the person doing it as well as the company doing it. And it's making sure that the people that we want to share it understand that. We're not just trying to use them in that way. We're trying to make sure that they can help us and support our message in the right way, but they're doing it in a way that they truly stand behind that message anyway in the first place. We're just giving them the right tools to kind of do it in the best way possible.
Definitely. That makes a ton of sense. So it's great that you've got the tools in place to do that. You mentioned authenticity. We spoke about that a lot when we caught up last week as well. And I'm curious to know how you kind of help drive that authenticity. I guess there's an element of like training, coaching, sort of guidelines and stuff. So it's all back to your point, like creating the conditions and the operating model. But yeah, I'd love to dig.
Exactly. It's about making sure that we are giving them all the tools to begin with. Now, those tools are everything from the guardrails and the guidance and everything else that we do. But it's also making sure that they actually have role models in the first place who they can look to within the organization and go, actually, well, I'm not sure how I would do this. Is there anybody that I can just use as an example? So what we started off with within our program was we've got kind of, especially some of our senior leaders or our global leaders who were bought into the project, we really made sure that their profiles were kind of shared and used in a really, really good way, in a really authentic way, in a sustainable way, which is a really important part of it, and making sure that they were sharing things in a way so that when we speak to other employees about how to do things, we've got real life examples that we can refer to, saying, look at how these people have done it, look at what they've done. Whenever we do training sessions on it, we will try and bring a senior leader from a certain part of the world into that training session for a 10 or a 15-minute slot where they can essentially kind of echo the sentiments of what we're trying to do within the training and show why it's impactful, and they can give their own perspective on how it benefited them, what they did, how they did it. And we'd really try to make that relevant depending on the territory that we're talking to and the specific areas that we're looking to hit, so that it feels like it's really bespoke to that area. One challenge that we've always had is, if you speak to a large group of people about why employee advocacy or any level of social is quite important, everybody will listen to it, everybody will appreciate its value, but a lot of people will leave thinking, that's great, but it's probably not for me, or I don't know where to start, so I'm just going to leave it. But actually, if you split that group into different people and make your training a bit more tailored and a bit more targeting, so that it's clearly showing that they are the people who can and should be doing this, and here are actionable insights for them, that will lead to them being a lot more likely to do it, to have that impact and to make it work. It takes a lot more work, but actually you've got to think about what your impact that you want to gain at the end of it is. It's a lot more worth investing that time to do it in the right way, to make sure that they have that set up, than it is to just tell everybody it's really good, but then nobody really does anything with it.
Am I right in assuming then, because everything you said makes a lot of sense, but am I right in my assumption that you kind of started this small focus on some key role models that you're describing, and you've kind of gradually grown that out, as rather than trying to say hey, we got this, go worldwide with it, it's a case of gradual kind of cohorting and having groups of individuals then get on board with it, and it kind of like a small nucleus suddenly becomes
exactly
a wider spread.
Exactly. So we started with a handful of global leaders and some senior leaders who we know worked with it. We used them as really good examples, and then we started to get more and more people who kind of start to share our content from that. Within that, we will use our data very, very importantly. So we'll give employees different tracking links to what we'd use from our main channels, just to actually make sure that actually what is the impact of what's happening here. When our employees are sharing things, are people going through to the website? Is that sort of stuff happening? So that we can see where the upticks are and we can do that data. That's definitely how we grew it. And there will always be a part of the employee advocacy program where it will just grow and grow and grow, and we will miss certain parts of it, or there'll be a handful of people who do just share everything in a way they shouldn't share it. But for us, the focus very much has to be on those who are doing it really, really well, and then being continuous examples for everybody else out there. And so for us, we've got a really great group of cohort who have done that.
That's really good to know. And let's talk a bit more about tracking success, because you mentioned tracking here. So let's talk about some of the more specific data stuff, and then we'll talk about some of the success stories you've seen, because conceptually, I think it's quite easy to understand, right? Like you said, 6 million versus a potential reach of 180 million. Everyone can build their brand at the same time as building the company's brand. Makes a ton of sense. But in reality, we see so few businesses truly adopting this. And I wonder if some of the devil's in the detail, because you've got to trust a little bit of magic here, because it's very hard to track.
Yeah.
So curious to know what you've done from a tracking perspective. You said different links that you're tracking. So can we deep dive into that?
Yeah, I mean, so there's probably different ways to track it. And so we do have, different things set up, like links for people to kind of share, separate links for people to use so that they can kind of do that sort of stuff. We also, within our employee advocacy model, kind of look at how many people shared a certain post, how many people read that post, what was the onward impact in terms of the reach of that post, all of those sort of different things, which are really helpful. But then, as we said kind of earlier, everything comes down to impact on the business. What impact is there on the business? And what we have heard on a number of occasions is actually the work and the content that people are sharing has led to them, in some cases, actually winning clients and deals. Because it comes back to that ultimate point of people see the insight, people see the expertise that we're sharing. It creates a connection or an understanding or an affiliation that they know what they're talking about. When they then want something in that space, they may get in touch with somebody from that space and go, hey, listen, you shared something on this. We'd love your help with some of this. And I think that's the ultimate feedback that we've had, where we've had people tell us that because you created this content and we shared it, not just directly because of that, but the constant program that we have, it led to somebody seeing something within there And that led to us generating some business that we may not have done in another way because they wouldn't have caught it in that same way. And I think that for us is the biggest compliment that we can get when it comes to what we do.
That's a perfect indictment. That must make you feel like all warm and fuzzy inside, because you have to trust in the process a little bit, right? Because this doesn't happen overnight, and it's not a linear correlation between, hey, I've posted something, where are my clients?
Yeah.
It happens over time. But yeah, as you say, it's that when you can kind of zoom out a little bit, because yes, metrics and growth, and it's great that you're tracking, like, as I think I've understood, like you are tracking the typical engagement metrics of the posts that the participants of the employee advocacy program are sharing, but you're also zooming it out to look at, like, what's the broader impact, right?
Exactly that. And the other key part of that we make sure that we kind of manage the expectation on is making sure that people are clear that there are no shortcuts here. The way that this program works and the way that success on social works is it can take a long time. It's about continually doing things consistently in the right way and making sure you continue to build that. Because, the more senior you get in any organization, the more time poor your executives are likely to be. And it's making sure within that they appreciate and understand that actually this isn't something where me or my team need to just post 4 times for me in the year and then I didn't see anything, so what happened? Actually, it's about a lot more than that. It's about making sure you consistently and authentically share things, and things may happen at some point that it may feel as though nothing has happened at all for a long time, but you don't know who's seen it, what mark that's left on them, that remembrance, all of that sort of stuff. And the fact that there's an appreciation for that is really important, and we bake that into our program and make sure that even at a really senior leadership level, where we know that actually a lot of our executives are going to have support from people doing it, there still needs to be a level of ownership from them where they need to be approving the final content. They need to be making sure that they are 100% happy that that is within their words and is written in the right way. And so that ownership piece is really, really important as part of that program, how we do stuff, because without that ownership piece, you are creating an expectation in terms of what success is going to look like that you're probably never going to meet. And it's about making sure that those ground conditions are set properly to begin with.
So to take that point, because it's a really interesting one, actually, when you're setting expectations you couldn't meet, are you referring to, like, simply just putting out the same content, same copy, just automating it across, like, these executives' profiles and expecting different results, as opposed to the senior exec taking that final 10% of, like, making sure it's in his words and his or her words on perspectives, and you bringing the unique experience to the narrative, right?
Exactly. It's bringing that unique experience, but it's also understanding the underlying fact as to why you're doing it. Mm-hmm. What is the point behind doing this? What is the purpose behind doing this? And understanding the value. It's that value point more than anything else. Because if they understand the value, then they will want to do it themselves because they'll believe that there is value in it. If they don't understand the value, then they'll do it for a bit because maybe a lot of people around them are doing it. But if they don't see the value, it will tail off and it will stop. And that's the sustainable part. Like, we have to create the conditions where actually, even if a support team or somebody is helping them with something, it can't just be they're helping me for 3 months or 6 months. You have to find a consistent way that they're helping you where it's not taking up all of their time to suggest content for you to do, but it's done in a way where it works. So it's everything from making sure that they understand the value to when they are sharing something, they're doing it in that way where it's not just copy paste and just sharing the exact same thing, that if you were to search for that search term, you see 20 other people sharing it, and then the authenticity has just been completely gone. And then when that authenticity goes, the trust potentially goes with it, and then there's that kind of knock-on snowball effect.
So yeah, that's a really interesting perspective, and it's one of those challenges that I think everyone that runs, like, these larger employee advocacy programs fights with, right? Fights with, like, getting levels of engagement, which you seem like you're doing really well as part of your role model program. But of course, you're still asking people to believe in something, because that's what it's a trust in the process. You've created the conditions, but there's still an element of belief. But let's now talk about a little bit around the future. What excites you for the future? What are the things what's the next iteration of this? Where else are you going at PwC? Yeah, I'd love to know that.
So one thing that I am really excited about, as I think a lot of people are excited about, is AI. And I'm excited about it, especially from an employee advocacy perspective, because when it comes to talking about that challenge that you have with authenticity and with people personalizing content and making sure it's right for them, part of the reason why that doesn't happen is people don't feel as though they have the confidence or the time to do it in the right way. And AI kind of counterintuitively could go from kind of, taking regular content and making it more authentic, even though it doesn't quite feel like that's what AI could do.
Purely,
yeah, but purely because, people can take an element of a certain report or the key findings and say, write me a post for this, gives them that initial great base that obviously will always need to be edited and changed to make sure that tone of voice is there. But it really helps to just kind of kick off that initial process where people get stuck at the beginning of to kind of, I don't know how to write this, I don't know how to share it, and starts to do that. That's one thing I'm really excited about, because that could really allow us to build things at an even bigger scale with that authenticity, with a little bit of support from AI. But I would heavily caveat that with the fact that obviously it is only as good as what you put into it, AI. So if what you've put into the AI is quite simply very generic, what they've given is quite generic, and you've not vetted it and you've put it out there, that will become apparent very, very quickly. So you have to make sure that actually we're probably entering a new stage where people are more likely to need to pick up the skill of strong AI prompt engineering, because that's going to be where the value is, and then using that to support how they kind of share their social messages and do different things. That's one thing I'm really, really excited about, because I think it can allow us to unlock what is a lot of the times the biggest challenge, especially with B2B employee advocacy, which is actually getting people to personalize things in a way and making them feel confident that they can do that in the right way. And that could be a really big key that could unlock it for us.
I absolutely adore that. Kunal, this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of this joyous experience with us. And I think everything you've set up has really, and framed today, really demonstrates a fantastic way of organizing, creating the operating model, creating those the content, creativity, and the data spoke model. I think there's a lot everyone can take away from this. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we close out today?
No, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I really, really appreciate that. I think the only other things that I'd say is, in terms of, we were at an event last week where we were talking to a lot of B2B people just about social media and how different things work. The one thing that I would say has been a big success for us and was a real trend with the people that I spoke with was just making sure that actually make sure your leadership has buy-in for what you do, and make sure they understand you appreciate and the value of social. I've been really lucky to be in organizations where I've been able to take them on the journey with us. And that's probably the next bit of advice. Take your senior management on the journey with you of what you're doing, because that will really allow them to kind of see the value of what you're doing and buy into it a lot more easier than just you presenting countless decks to them about why things are good and why things don't work. Should take them on that journey and you'll see a much bigger impact.
I love it. Thank you so much, Kunal.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you so much for watching or listening, and we'll be back next time with some more B2B leaders sharing more of their expertise around how they build brands and how they drive growth through content and community. Be sure to click like and subscribe to help this podcast grow, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.